Hello Internet strangers, this is a video tutorial going into using R&R Studio to access campaign finance data through the openFEC API. This is a video tutorial where I go in more in depth, line by line, explaining some of the files and the logic behind things for those less experienced. There is a text version of this tutorial up on my blog if you want to go a little bit faster. You can download all the files for this on my GitHub. You can just clone or download that and follow along. You will need R&R Studio installed to completely replicate this. Without further ado, let's dive in a little bit to the API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. What that means is that they've made a set of predictable URLs that we can kind of guess programmatically to access data at higher volumes than we can through the traditional FEC exploring site. So if we want to like check out Paul Ryan while he's still in town doing his thing, you know, we have to click through, wait for the response. We can get that. Maybe we can go in and look at an individual election. But there's a lot of clicking, and if you want to look at a lot of things, you need to do it programmatically. So that's the justification for why you might be interested in doing this. So let's jump into R. Oh, excuse me. The first thing you need to do, make sure you sign up for an API key. That's going to identify you in your URL request. You're going to need a specific to you. It's like a password or an ID that makes sure that nobody's going to abuse the system or request too much. You do need an API key. Let's jump into R. So we need to install what's called a wrapper library. Robin Pollock has published r.openfec on GitHub. That is like some glue. It's going to paste together the URLs that we need to access. So we'll load that library after we're done installing it. We're going to load HTTR, which is some more helpful tools for using APIs and making requests out of R. And then we're going to load the tidyverse, which is a popular set of R packages used for wrangling and visualization and all kinds of good stuff. That key that you got, hopefully the email has come through. I saved mine into a file called data.gov.key. I did not want to put it in the script that I published to GitHub because protecting your key is going to be important. That file just has one line, that API key, and you're going to assign it that string that you got from the email. You could put it in your script if you're not going to publish it anywhere, but this is kind of a good practice to get into. And to load it from that file, I'm just going to say source. I'm going to run source data.gov.key, and that's going to pretend like I ran that R file, or it's R code, in my software. And we're going to get a variable, and you see the value API key, and you're going to see a censored, that's my key. I don't want to reveal it in the video either. And we're going to move right on to the election that we're interested in. I'm going to construct an R list that contains everything that I'm interested in one variable. And this is going to populate throughout the rest of the code. You can see where this is going to come in handy. You can enter whatever race you're interested in. Right now it only supports House races. But if you want to do your home district, that's fine. I've chosen my home district, Virginia's 5th. We're going to choose the current cycle, 2018. That's all I've really tested with. Candidate status, we only are interested in candidates that are currently in the race. All right. We need to run the list. So election of interest. We now have an R list in our global environment that we can access later on without changing the text. So if we need to change this later, we don't. That's the only place we need to change it. The first thing we're going to do with the API is we're going to just search for candidates running in our race. So let's run that. And we have a new list object, candidates running. And there it is. The first response we got from the FEC API, we have a list of different candidates in this race. Yeah. All right. I'm confirming this. So there's all kinds of data in this. We have district number, have they raised funds or not, the last filing date, the name, lots of different things. We want to clean this. Each candidate is kind of currently in its own item in this list. There's 14 items, but we're not interested in everybody, and we're definitely not interested in keeping it messy like this. What we want to do is kind of create a data frame that's easier to work with. And that step happens here. So this is kind of my cleaning. And I'm going to run this, candidates running data frame. And this might be something more friendly that you're used to working with on like Excel or a CSV. My cleaning, we go and get 6 variables. We get the last name, their first name, a candidate ID, which is unique to every candidate. That's important for merging this information with other requests that we're going to make from the API, or later on maybe requesting itemized receipts or disbursements. We get the party, we get that candidate status, C for current, and then a full name that's in the order of first and last. So how we clean that, we're going to use a function called map on that list, the candidates running list, that's got lots of different levels and hierarchies that we need to navigate. We are going to map candidates running, and then we're going to look at the content and then the results. So that is the content and then the results. And then for each item in that list, each item we're going to call X, and we're going to take the name value from that list, or the name property. And we're going to collect them all and unlist them and put it in a name column for candidates data frame. So in our candidates data frame, again, I separated out name later, but if we see candidate ID, we map the candidate IDs, and we have a clean candidate ID column. And we could go in and look these up manually. Where's candidate ID? Right there. But this kind of just puts them in the same place in that new data frame. Then we're going to filter, which means we want to make sure that the candidate status is in the candidate statuses list that we're interested in. We're going to separate the name column into a last name and a first name column. And then we're going to pretty quickly do some more cleaning to handle what happens if somebody doesn't have a first name. And then we're going to do a full name in the order that, first and last. So, and there's a little bit of a funky thing with Tom Garrett, Mr. That's fine. Moving on, we have a clean candidates that we're interested in, current candidates. It's going to look very similar pulling the financial data. So get election financial summary is part of that r.openFEC wrapper library. Candidates search is from that library too. We're going to run this with a lot of the same parameters that we did above, but this time what gets returned we don't get candidate status, but we do get cash on hand, we get total receipts, we get total disbursement, we got financial summary information programmatically for all 6 candidates ready to be worked with. I think it's pretty cool. We're going to clean this in a similar way. We're going to make a financial summary data frame. And this looks very similar again to what we did up above. We're going to map from each item in the results list that we're interested in. So we're going to pull the name, candidate ID, the total receipts, total disbursements, and then the cash on hand. Then we're going to left join the candidates running. So let me show you kind of what this looks like. So the end result of financial summary DF And that error is fine. Or it's not an error, it's a warning. This is the data frame we're interested in. This is in tidy format, so every row is an observation, and every column describes part of that observation. The observation is the amount. We have the type of financial information that it is. We have a party description, we have the candidate ID, and we have a full name. What that's doing step by step, so if we do just financial summary DF and look at it again, this is also pretty readable and useful. It's in wide format, which might be what you're used to, but for tidying the data, it allows us to do some more visualization stuff in a more efficient way, which we'll get to at the end of this tutorial. That left join is going to add, so we don't really have candidate ID, or we have a candidate ID, but we don't have candidate status. Left join that other data frame by candidate ID. We're going to get candidate status again. And we have one NA, it's kind of a rogue return, but we want to filter to make sure that we get rid, or we only want to keep the ones that we're interested in. So we got rid of him there. We're going to select the columns that we're interested in and get rid of everything else. And then this is a big step. So gather means we're going to convert from wide to a long and tidy format. We're going to create two new columns, a type column and an amount column. And we're going to gather the columns between total receipts and total disbursements. So total receipts, cash on hand, total disbursements. The column names are going to go into the new type column, and the values in those columns are going to go into the new amount column. So if we run all that, in the type column we have the old column names, and in the amount column we have the values. Then we want to do a little bit of cleaning, so we don't really care about keeping those underscores when they're not column names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the underscores with spaces in the string replace statement, and then I'm going to send the strings to titles. So it's going to, instead of all caps or some lowercase, if that's the case, we're going to have nice and clean formatted names and types. Next, for creating the charts, we want to provide some information about the period ending of the coverage of the candidates that we're collecting. Sometimes the candidate might have entered the race before filing any financial information or doing the financial reports. Maybe they dropped out. We just want to make sure that the period endings are well documented in our analysis. We're going to check to make sure that there are coverage dates. So this is going to get rid of folks that maybe just entered. And then we're going to turn this into a data frame, similar mapping. Again, we're just checking to see what period endings do we have. And if there are more, or if there's just one, then we're going to put that in the subtitle like that. If there are two, we have differing period endings. Not a ton of extra information, but this is kind of just a quick way of dealing with it and making sure that we know what's going on. And then if there's more than two, I want to go back later on, but I still want to mark it. So candidate order, we're going to filter on the type total receipts and arrange by the amount. Basically, I want to show the candidates that have received the most in this cycle from top to bottom. And then since we're going to be plotting the financial summary data frame, we're going to turn that into a factor variable. And we want to set the levels equal to the order of the candidates that we just arranged. We're going to set up some colors according to the party. That's a blue for Dems, red for Republicans. It's like a gray for independents, green for Greens, and I think that's yellow for Libertarians. So we're going to set an output path. We're going to create a folder to receive the charts that we're going to make. So we're going to create a new directory. I'm going to create a file name to save it. I'm going to capture the system date. And we don't want total receipts. We want to call this financial summary. And then we're going to paste in, again, the election of interest, cycle, state, all the good identifying information. So make sure we get the file name there. The author is me. You're going to want to change that. Do not pretend to be me, please. But if anybody has any questions, they can come back to you and ask them. And now it's time to chart. So I'm going to just run everything real quick and show you again what that result looks like. And so then we have a nice summary graphic of the Virginia 5th House District, except there's no period ending. What's going on there? Uh-oh, did I not run? Let's check this. We want coverage end date there. A little bit of troubleshooting. And there is, so I did record a troubleshooting tutorial. I tried to do this earlier this afternoon and ran into some problems. Everybody does, and I decided to capture it. So if you're interested in how to troubleshoot in R, that's also something that you might want to look at. So let's run that again. And we're going to create the chart again, and we're going to save it. And there we go. So the period ending 2017, 12, 31. And we have a nice chart. So let's walk through what a ggplot is for, or what each of these lines is kind of doing. We're going to pass the financial summary data frame through the pipe operator into a ggplot object. So we were charting this financial summary data frame. We're going to start a ggplot, and we're going to add a geom bar. So we're going to map the full name column of the financial summary data frame to the X axis. We're going to map the Y to the amount. The fill is going to equal the party. We want the stat to be identity because it's an absolute Y value. Alpha, we're going to give it just a little bit of transparency so you can see the lines through the bars if that's necessary. Geom label is going to do a similar thing to the bar as far as the mapping goes. Instead of drawing a bar, it's going to draw that text label at the end. And we're going to format that label using the scales library and the dollar function. So we're going to format amount as a dollar value. We're going to justify it a little bit so that it sits on the end of the bars, and then a little bit more aesthetic things with the padding and the size of the labels. The facet wrap says that we're going to do one panel for each type. So we have 3 types: total receipts, cash on hand, total disbursements. It's going to facet on that variable, and for each category, it's going to create a separate chart. So the basic non-formatted chart, I'll pull this up just an R. So we have 3 of them. Now you'll notice that there's not enough space for the labels. They kind of hide. This is kind of a washed out look. The Dems are red and the Republicans are blue, which is not how it usually goes. So we're going to add some scale information with the scale Y continuous and scale fill manual lines here. So scale Y continuous, we want the labels to be formatted in dollars. The limits. So if some candidates have negative cash on hand because they have debts, if that's the case, we want the limit on the bottom to equal that minimum amount. And if it's not, then we want the limit to just be 0. And that would result in a bar kind of going to the left of 0. There's not too many candidates that I've come across that have that, but you never know. And then we're going to make the max limit equal to twice the highest amount in our data frame. And that's going to give a little bit of space for the labels. So let's run that and see what that looks like. All right, we have better colors. We're running out of room just because, again, this is in the, there we go. So we're kind of constructing this line by line. We're going to give it some labels that make sense. So the titles, they're in good position. And then we're going to theme it. We're going to control some of the text size and fonts, a little bit more spacing between the panels, get rid of that gray background and some of the lines that we don't need. And so that is going to look... Now it's still a little crunched in this little plot previewer. That's why we're saving it as a variable and then saving it to a PNG. So the end result, you do have like a nice clean graphic here. So that's the basics of it. But where this really kind of starts to shine is when you want to look at a ton of races. So I've already kind of put placeholder stuff that we just have to uncomment out. But I'm going to create a function called chart financial summary that takes one argument, an election of interest, which is basically just that, and creates the chart for it. So I'm going to uncomment everything here. And so I'm going to create this function, chart financial summary. We're just going to run it. And then let's do Virginia. So we're going to do all 11 House district races in Virginia. And we're going to see what happens. So right now we just have that 5th district folder. But for each district, we're going to create another chart. So here we go. First district is in, second, third, and so on. All right, let's just verify these warnings to make sure that there's nothing too surprising. So all of these things are safe. The column joins, we are expecting that. We already created a 5th folder, so that's fine. And let's just take a look here. So there's the first race where Mr. Whitman is raised a lot. Doesn't have a whole lot of competition. And the 2nd district, Taylor's in the lead. And so on. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting races going on in Virginia right now. And those financial numbers do get updated at the next filing date. It's this weekend. And with the API, we can look at it pretty quickly. So hopefully this helps you out. If there are any questions that you might have, hit me up on GitHub, open up an issue, go to Twitter, whatever, and I'll try to help you get running if you do want to attempt this. Thanks for listening, folks, and I'll see you around.